There's a modification sitting on your car right now that could cost you more than the car's worth, and you probably paid extra for it. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being specific because there's a whole category of parts that get sold to you in a bright box, on a shelf, at a store with a national name on the sign, and the second you bolt them on, you are technically breaking federal law, not state law, federal. And nobody at the register is gonna mention that. I spent 18 years inside the industry. Ford, then GM in powertrain, then 6 years at Stellantis doing transmission validation until I walked out in 2023. And one of the ugliest things I learned in there is how wide the gap is between what's legal to sell and what's legal to install. Those are two completely different questions. Almost nobody knows that. So let's go through the list. And I'm gonna tell you right now, one of these is going to make you check your own car before this video's over. And there's one on this list near the end that got a guy about 20 minutes from my house a bill so big he sold the truck. I'll get there. Look, I'm not the fun police. I've got a 2018 F-150 with modifications on it. Suspension, cooling, tires. Not for looks, for longevity. I like a modified car. I just don't like watching somebody get hammered by a rule they never knew existed for a part that a store sold them across a counter. Start with the easy one. The one you can see from 100 feet away. License plate covers. You've seen them. The smoked plastic shield. The tinted cover. The one advertised as photo blocker. Sometimes it's a spray. Sometimes it's a film. Sometimes it's just a plastic frame that eats the top and bottom of your plate. My neighbor Dave, who I love and who is wrong about almost everything, put one of those smoked covers on his Silverado about 2 years ago because he read online it would beat the red light cameras. It does not beat the red light cameras. What it does do is make your plate unreadable at an angle, and in a whole lot of states, that alone is the violation. It's not you obscured the plate on purpose. It's the plate is not plainly visible and legible. That's the whole standard. Intent doesn't enter into it. In California, the vehicle code is written so tightly that even a clear cover is a problem. Not tinted, clear, because a clear plastic sheet still produces glare, and glare defeats a camera, and the code doesn't care about your intentions. Michigan, where I live, is more relaxed about frames, but still gets very unhappy when a frame covers the registration tab or the state name. And here's the part people miss. The frame the dealer gave you for free, with the dealership's name printed across the bottom, is frequently the exact thing covering the state name on your plate. Free from the dealer. Illegal in the parking lot. That's not a joke. That's just how it shakes out. And the plate flipper, the motorized bracket that spins the plate. I want to be careful here. That one's not a traffic infraction in most places. That's a criminal statute in a lot of states. Different category entirely. You are not getting a ticket. You are getting arrested. Now, the big one, the one that half of everybody watching has already done, window tint. Here's where it gets interesting because tint law is the single most misunderstood thing in the entire aftermarket. And the confusion is not an accident. The number that matters is VLT, visible light transmission. It's the percentage of light that gets through the glass. Higher number, more light, lighter tint. 70% VLT means 70% of the light gets through. 5%, what everybody calls limo tint, means almost nothing does. And every state sets its own limit, and they're wildly different, and the shop that installs it is not liable. You are. California is one of the strictest in the country. Front side windows have to let through 70% of the light. 70. That is almost no tint at all on your driver's window. My state, Michigan, does something different and weirder. You basically can't tint the front side windows at all beyond a strip at the top, roughly the top 4 inches. Meanwhile, you cross into a couple of southern states and you're allowed down into the 30s. So a guy in Georgia gets a perfectly legal tint job, drives that car to Michigan for a job, and he is now illegal. The film didn't change. The state line did. And here's the step nobody takes. Ready? Your factory glass already has tint in it, not film, tint in the glass itself. It's called privacy glass on the rear, and even on the front, most modern laminated glass isn't at 100% transmission. It's usually somewhere in the high 70s to high 80s. So when a shop puts a 70% film on a window that was already at 80, the math is multiplicative, not additive. 80% glass times 70% film gives you 56% total. You just failed a 70% standard while installing a film that was sold to you as legal tint. I've watched this argument happen in a parking lot. Guy waving the receipt. Cop with the tint meter. The meter doesn't read the receipt. And the windshield. Everybody forgets the windshield. There's a line etched into the glass near the top, marked AS1. Look for it next time you're in the car. That line is the legal boundary for tint on almost every windshield in America. Above it, generally fine. Below it, generally not. That sun strip you had put on that comes down 6 inches, measure it against the AS1 line. I'd bet money on what you find. Exhaust. All right, I've got a lot to say here because this is where I spent a real chunk of my career. Sitting in rooms arguing about sound, the straight pipe, the muffler delete, the resonator delete, the catback that came with a disclaimer in 8-point font. Here's the actual legal architecture, and almost nobody explains it correctly. Federal law doesn't set a decibel number for your car's exhaust noise. States do, and a bunch of them use a specific standard. A fixed sound level test, run under a Society of Automotive Engineers procedure, J11492. In California, for a passenger vehicle under 6,000 pounds gross weight, the ceiling is 95 decibels under that test. That number's been on the books since 2003. What changed in 2019 was AB 1824. Before that, a loud exhaust citation was a fix-it ticket. You'd get 30 days to correct it, and the ticket goes away. After AB 1824, it's an immediate fine. No fix-it. You can still take it to the State Bureau of Automotive Repair, get a compliance certificate showing you're under 95, and try to get the citation dismissed in court. But you're now spending Saturdays on this. 95 decibels, for reference, is roughly a lawnmower running next to your head. Most factory cars, even fast ones, run down around 75. There's a huge amount of headroom in that number, which means when somebody tells you the law is unreasonable, well, it's really not. You have to work pretty hard to get to 95. But, and here's the piece that gets people, the noise limit is only half of the statute. In California, and in a bunch of other states with similar language, it's separately illegal to modify the exhaust system in a way that amplifies or increases the noise above what the vehicle produced from the factory. Read that again. That's not a decibel threshold. That's a design prohibition. You could theoretically be under 95 and still be in violation because you removed the resonator, and removing the resonator increased the noise over stock. 2 separate hooks in the same statute, and cutouts. Electronic exhaust cutouts. The valve you put before the muffler hit a button and dump straight out the side. In most states with an exhaust statute, that's a specific prohibition, called out by name because the entire purpose of the device is to bypass the muffler. The fact that it's closed most of the time is not a defense. Possession of the bypass on a street vehicle is the violation. The one people never see coming is the tune, the pop and bang tune, the one where the ECU dumps fuel on overrun so you get that crackle on D-seal. Guys pay $400, $500 for that. What that tune is actually doing is putting raw fuel into a hot exhaust and igniting it downstream of the combustion chamber. If you've still got catalytic converters on that car, you are cooking them. And if it's an emissions-controlled car, which yours is, modifying the ECU calibration in a way that affects emissions performance is a whole different animal. Which brings me to the section I promised you, but not yet. 2 more first. Hold on. Quick aside, and then I'll get back to it. My son Jake is 15, wants a WRX. The 2002 to 2007 kind, the ones with the good hood scoop and the bad head gaskets. And every conversation we have about that car eventually lands on this exact list, because every single one of those cars for sale under $8,000 has been modified by someone with a laptop and a YouTube tab open. And the thing I keep telling him, and I'll tell you, is that the modification isn't the problem. The undisclosed modification is the problem, because you're the one holding it when the state asks who owns the car. Okay, lights, light bars, the LED bar across the bumper or up on the roof throwing out 16,000 lumens. They're not illegal to own. They're not illegal to install. On a whole lot of trucks, they're the single most useful thing you can bolt on if you spend real time off pavement. What's illegal in the overwhelming majority of states is having them uncovered and usable on a public road. Two separate rules stack up here. First, most states cap the number of forward-facing auxiliary lamps you're allowed to have, and the cap is usually somewhere between 2 and 4 total, including your actual headlights. A 40-inch light bar with 8 pods in it doesn't get counted as one lamp in a lot of jurisdictions. It gets counted as 8. Second, most states require that any non-compliant forward-facing lamp be covered while on the road, which is why you see serious off-road guys with an opaque cover strapped over the bar. That's not a fashion choice. That's a guy who read the code. And the reason this matters more than a fine, an LED bar throws light that has no cutoff. None. A real headlamp, a compliant one, has a very carefully designed beam pattern with a sharp horizontal cutoff, so light goes on the road and not into the eyes of the guy coming the other way. A light bar just sprays 16,000 lumens with no cutoff into an oncoming windshield is not a light. It's a weapon, which is the perfect setup for the one that makes me the angriest. HID and LED bulb retrofits. You go on the internet, you buy a set of LED bulbs or an HID conversion kit, and the box says DOT. It says DOT right there on the box. And you drop them into the halogen headlight housing on your 2016 Corolla. And now you've got these blazing white lights and everybody's flashing you and you can't figure out why. Here's why. And this is not my opinion. This is documented federal position. Headlights in this country are governed by Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 108. And 108 doesn't regulate the bulb by itself. It regulates the headlamp as a complete system, housing, reflector or projector optics, and light source, certified together. The reflector in your Corolla was designed around a specific filament, at a specific position in three-dimensional space, at a specific size. Every curve in that reflector was mapped to bounce light off that exact filament into a legal beam pattern. An LED chip is not a filament, and HID arc is not a filament. Different size, different position, different emission geometry. So when you drop one into that housing, the optics are now aiming light in directions they were never designed to aim it. And NHTSA has stated this plainly. They concluded it is not possible to produce an HID conversion kit converting a halogen system to HED that complies with 108. Not difficult, not possible. In one investigation, they found a conversion headlamp exceeded the maximum allowable candle power by over 800%. 800%. Same logic applies to drop-in LED bulbs. There is no aftermarket LED replacement bulb that's been through the federal process to be listed as a compliant replaceable light source for a halogen housing. The DOT approved stamp on the box is, in a lot of cases, just ink. Nobody at the federal level approved it. And here's the nuance that matters to you, and that most people get wrong in both directions. The federal government regulates what can be manufactured and sold, and it also prohibits a shop or a mechanic from knowingly making compliant safety equipment inoperative. But enforcement against you, an individual, for what you did to your own car in your own driveway, that falls to your state, and a lot of states don't chase it. So you'll hear people say, It's totally legal. Nobody's ever been ticketed. And you'll hear other people say it's a federal crime. Both are half right and both are misleading. The accurate version is the part is non-compliant. The installation is non-compliant. And whether anybody comes after you depends entirely on where you live and whether you show up at inspection. Now, here's the step further. The one that's actually about you and not about the law. If you want more light, and after about age 40 you do want more light, I want more light. I noticed it around 2019, and I did something about it. The answer isn't a hotter bulb in an old housing. The answer is a projector housing that was designed for the source. A full assembly engineered around an LED array with real optics and a real cutoff. It costs more. It's $400, $500 a side on some cars instead of $40 for a pair of bulbs off the internet. And it will outlight the LED and halogen setup so decisively it isn't a conversation, because light on the road is about beam pattern, not raw output. You can double the lumens and see less. I've measured it. Glare bouncing back off a wet road actually reduces your usable distance. And look, before somebody comments that they've had cheap LEDs for 3 years, and love them, I believe you. You love them because your dash looks bright and the pavement right in front of your bumper is lit up like a stage. That's exactly the illusion. The light you can see is scattered light. The light you need is projected light. They are not the same thing. Smoked tail lights, fast one, but ugly. The tint spray, the smoke film, the blackout overlay. Every one of those reduces the light output of a lamp that was certified at a minimum photometric level. That certification isn't decorative. It's the number of candela required for a driver at a distance to register your brake light in time to not hit you. Cut that output by 40%. And you've cut the reaction distance. That's the whole mechanism. There's no legal gray area here in most states. The code language usually reads something like the lamp must be visible from 500 feet, or must not be modified in a way that reduces its effectiveness. Both of those you fail immediately. And the DIY version, the spray can, is the worst of all because it's not uniform. It degrades under UV, and after a Michigan winter, it turns milky and hazes over. I've seen a 2015 Mustang, gorgeous car, where the taillights had gone from smoked to just fogged, like cataracts. Owner didn't notice because he only ever looked at them in daylight, underglow, and colored lights. The rule that people never learn until it's too late. It's not really about whether you can have colored lighting. It's about the color, the direction, and whether it flashes. Red and blue. Showing to the front is the loaded one. That's the police color combination, and every state has statutes that prohibit civilians from displaying it. Some states go further. Anything red visible from the front, period. And flashing or rotating anything in almost any color tends to be reserved for emergency and service vehicles. So the Underglow kit with the police strobe mode built into the app is a kit that includes a mode that can get you charged with impersonating an officer, halo rings, interior footwell lighting, the LED strip in the grille, colors, and behavior are the variables. Steady white or amber to the front, steady red to the rear is the general skeleton of the rules. Everything else, check your state code. And I mean read it. It's 4 paragraphs. It takes 10 minutes. Horns. Train horns. The dual-tone air horns people put on trucks that hit 130, 140 decibels. Most states have a maximum horn audibility standard, and a lot of them cap it explicitly. A number in the code, in decibels, often around 110. Above that, the device is illegal to install on a street vehicle. And there's a second layer. A lot of horn statutes also say the horn may only be used to give warning, which means the guy who scares pedestrians with it at a red light is racking up a separate violation on top of the equipment violation. I'll tell you something, as a guy who did NVH work adjacent to my actual job, 140 decibels at close range isn't funny. That's threshold of pain territory. That's the kind of impulse that can cause permanent hearing damage in an unprotected ear at short distance. It's not a prank device. It's a piece of industrial equipment somebody put a wire on. Radar detectors and jammers. These get lumped together and they should not be. A radar detector, the passive box on the windshield that beeps, is legal in most of the country for passenger cars. Two big exceptions in the US, Virginia and Washington, D.C. And separately, they're prohibited in commercial vehicles over 10,000 pounds under federal regulation everywhere, no matter what state you're in. A radar jammer is a completely different thing. A jammer actively transmits a signal to interfere with police radar. That's not a traffic violation, that's an unlicensed transmission on a regulated frequency, which puts you in front of the FCC, and the penalties there aren't in traffic court dollars. Same category for laser jammers in the states that specifically ban them. The difference between a detector and a jammer is the difference between owning a scanner and owning a transmitter. Listening versus broadcasting. That single distinction is the whole legal line, and people who buy these things off a website frequently don't know which one they bought. Alright, here's the one I promised you. Emissions deletes. And this is the one where I stop being the guy who explains the rules and start being the guy who sat in the room. The catalytic converter delete, the EGR delete, the DPF delete on a diesel, the off-road use only tune, the little module that goes in line with the O2 sensor to spoof the signal so the check engine light goes off. Every single one of those is a violation of federal law, not state, federal. The Clean Air Act prohibits tampering with emissions control equipment, and it separately prohibits manufacturing, selling, or installing a defeat device, a part whose principal effect is to bypass or render inoperative an emission control. And the penalties are not theoretical. The EPA publishes them. For an individual, the statutory maximum runs into the thousands of dollars per tampering event or per defeat device. For manufacturers and dealers, it's tens of thousands per vehicle, and they enforce it. This is the part people don't believe. The EPA has resolved dozens and dozens of these cases. One diesel defeat device distributor got hit with a default judgment north of $7 million. That was for close to 14,000 violations of the defeat device prohibition. The tuning company PPEI and its owner pleaded guilty and agreed to pay over $3 million in criminal fines and civil penalties. Rudy's Performance Parts settled civil claims in the millions and pleaded guilty on the criminal side. These aren't warning letters. These are federal cases with plea agreements. Now, enforcement priority has historically pointed at the sellers and installers rather than at the guy who deleted his own truck. That's true. But historically is doing a lot of work in that sentence, and there's a second mechanism that gets you long before the feds ever would. Your state inspection. Because on a modern car, tampering doesn't just remove a part. It removes the monitor. Your OBD system runs readiness monitors, self-tests that confirm each emission subsystem is working, catalyst monitor, evap monitor, oxygen sensor monitor. In most inspection states, the test isn't a tailpipe sniff anymore. They plug into the port and they look at whether the monitors have run and whether they passed. Gut the cat and spoof the downstream sensor, and you don't get a clean pass. You get a monitor that never sets ready. And an incomplete readiness status is a fail in a lot of places, all by itself. Here's the guy I mentioned at the start. Not a friend of a friend, about 20 minutes from me. Bought a used 2016 diesel pickup at a good price. Really good price. Deleted. DPF gone. EGR blanked. Tuned. Previous owner had done it, and the truck ran great and pulled like a freight train. He didn't do the delete. He bought the delete. Then he moved for work to a state with real inspection, and now he owns a truck that cannot be registered. And to make it registrable, he has to put back a diesel particulate filter, an EGR cooler, a full exhaust with the SCR components, plus the sensors, plus the factory calibration back in the ECU. On a modern diesel, that parts list alone runs into the thousands. I've heard people put the full unwind at anywhere from $4,000 to $8,000 depending on the platform, and the labor is brutal because the exhaust bolts have been cooking for 6 years. He sold the truck at a loss to somebody in another state. That's the trap. The delete travels with the vehicle. The bill lands on whoever's holding it. And now let me tell you why I take this one personally. I sat in meetings, plural, where the emissions calibration was the single most argued over line in the whole program. Engineers fighting for a cooler EGR flow rate, for a bigger filter, for a better region strategy. Because everybody in that room knew that if we cheaped out, the customer was gonna live with a soot-clogged intake and a Regan cycle that ran too hot, and a check engine light at 80,000 miles. And every single time, somebody with a spreadsheet would explain that the improvement cost too much per unit. So here's my honest position, and it might not be the one you expect from an ex-industry guy who's mad at the industry. The emissions hardware is often badly executed. It is. The EGR system on a lot of diesels was under-engineered, and it does clog, and it will cost you money, and that is a real grievance. But deleting it doesn't fix the engineering. It just moves the entire consequence onto a public road and onto your resale value and onto the next owner. Those are two different problems, and people keep solving the second one by creating the first. Suspension, lifts and drops, both regulated and almost nobody knows it. Most states have a bumper height statute, a maximum height for the bottom edge of your front and rear bumper, usually scaled by vehicle weight class. The reason is grim, and it's worth knowing. It's about underride. If your bumper sits above the sedan's crash structure, then in a collision, the sedan doesn't hit a bumper. It goes underneath, and the truck's frame rail comes in at windshield height. That's the geometry. Bumper height rules are not aesthetic. They're written in blood. Plenty of states also have headlight height rules, a maximum and minimum distance off the ground, which a big lift will violate on its own, independent of the bumper. And on the other end, the slammed cars. Too low, and you're violating minimum ground clearance rules in some states, and the stretch and poke setup. Tires narrower than the wheel, wheels sticking outside the fender line, runs straight into fender coverage laws that require the tire tread be covered, which exists because an uncovered tire flings rocks and water at the car behind you. And here's the step further on the lift, the mechanical one. Lift a truck without correcting the driveline angles, and you're gonna eat U-joints. Lift it without re-indexing the steering geometry, and you'll get death wobble on a solid axle setup. Lift it without accounting for the change in roll center, and the thing will body roll in a way that surprises you in an emergency lane change. I'm not saying don't lift a truck. I'm saying the lift is a systems change, not a parts change, and the guy who sold you the 4-inch kit for $600 did not sell you the geometry. All right, now the thing I've been holding back since the beginning of this video, the insurance. Because the ticket is not the real cost of any of this. The ticket is a couple $100 and an afternoon. Here's the real cost. You crash. It's not even your fault. Somebody runs a red and hits your quarter panel. Adjuster comes out, takes photos of the whole car, and adjusters photograph the entire car, not just the damage. And in those photos are your 5% tint, your smoke taillights, and your LED bulbs in a halogen housing. Now, a modification alone usually isn't grounds for a denial. Insurers deal with modified cars every day, but two things do happen, and I've seen both. First, undisclosed modifications that materially change the risk can absolutely be grounds for the carrier to fight the claim, and depending on the state and the policy language, to argue the policy was issued on incomplete information. Second, and much more common, if the other side's lawyer can plausibly connect an illegal modification to the crash, you just handed them comparative fault. Your taillights were 50% dimmer than certified. Now, the guy who rear-ended you has an argument. Now, you're not at 0% liability, you're at 30. And 30% of a serious injury claim is a number that will follow you for years. Nobody at the tint shop mentions that. I know how this sounds. I sound like I'm telling you to keep your car stock. I'm not. I'm telling you that every one of these mods has a technical cost, a legal cost, and a liability cost. And the guy selling it only ever discusses the first one, and usually gets that wrong too. So go do this today, right now, before you forget, because you will forget. That's how this works. Walk out to your car. 3 things. 1. Look at your license plate frame and see if it's covering the state name or the registration tab. 2. Get down and find the AS1 marking on the corner of your windshield and see whether your sun strip is above or below it. 3. Pop your headlight open. Pull the bulb and look at what's actually in there. Because a lot of you bought this car used and you have no idea what the last owner put in it. Come back and tell me in the comments what you found, model year, and what was wrong. I read them. And if you find something on that list that isn't yours that came with the car, say so, because that's the most common answer. And I want the next guy scrolling to see how common it is. And one more thing, and then I'm done. Every single thing on this list is a modification somebody chose. But the most expensive thing that's going to happen to your engine isn't something you chose. It's happening inside your intake right now, on a schedule, and there's no part to remove and no law involved. If you've got a direct injected engine, and if your car's newer than about 2012, you almost certainly do, carbon is building up on the back of your intake valves in a layer that no fuel additive on Earth will touch, because your fuel never goes near those valves. That's a real failure mode with a real repair, and there's exactly one way to fix it properly, and about 4 ways people get sold that don't work. That's the next one. If you're not subscribed, do it now, because when I put that out, you're not going to get told. And that one is going to save you more money than everything I just said in this video.